If I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, but do not have love, I have become a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and know all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to remove mountains, but do not have love, I have nothing. And if I give all my possessions to feed the poor, and if I surrender my body to be burned, but do not have love, it profits me nothing. Love is patient, love is kind, and is not jealous. Love does not brag and is not arrogant, does not act unbecomingly, it does not seek its own, is not provoked, does not take into account a wrong suffered, does not rejoice in unrighteousness, but rejoices with the truth, bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never fails. But if there are gifts of prophecy, they will be done away. If there are tongues, they will cease. If there is knowledge, it will be done away. For we know in part, and we prophesy in part. But when the perfect come, the partial will be done away. When I was a child, I used to speak like a child, think like a child, reason like a child. When I became a man, I did away with childish things. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then I will know fully, just as I also have been fully known. But now faith, hope, love, abide these three, but the greatest of these is love.
Thank you, Ashton. Appreciate that. Ben, you're one tall dude, man. It's like over my head. All right. Well, welcome out. Welcome to church. How's everybody doing this morning? You guys doing okay? Yeah. Well, we have coffee out front, by the way, if you didn't know that. How are you guys doing this morning? Okay? Yeah. All right. Well, sounds good. Sorry, I got to kind of get set up this morning. Been one of those weeks. We had the water go out here at the church this week, and you realize that in a 100-year-old building, that's a bit of a problem, man, because all of a sudden everything leaks, and so we've been poor Adam, man. He's been out here chasing leaks and fixing stuff this week, and it's been quite the week. But anyways, glad you guys are with us this morning. Thank you for being here for this time of worship and just around the Word. Ashton, I really appreciate that. So here's the deal. We started this new series last week. So if you weren't here, this is your first Sunday with us. First and foremost, thanks for joining us. But secondly, let me just take a few seconds and kind of catch you up on what we're talking about. This sermon series name is Expedition 1. And anybody in here ever been a part of like a small group before? Anybody, just show of hands. Who's been a part of a small group? Missional community, is that language familiar with anybody? Missional community language. Got one who's been. That's kind of you. Yes, perfect. She's tracking missional community language. So if you're familiar with either of those concepts, it's going to be both and neither of those, right? It's going to be kind of a blending of both of those, and we'll explain how that's going to work out here pretty soon. But I told you guys from the beginning, and I just really laid everything out there, that at the end of this like sermon series, the kind of one of the major points is that I want to get as many people engaged in these groups as is humanly possible. And I told you that like that's no small ask, right? I'm asking for an hour and a half to 2 hours out of your week, right? Dude, like, who's got that to spare? Anybody? And if so, like, dude, we need to sit down and talk afterwards because I need to learn a few things from you, right? I mean, like, dude, I've got a job. I'm a full-time like graduate student. I'm on the board for our softball team here in town. I'm coaching softball. Like, got kids. We got homework. We're starting back to school this week. My wife works, right? And here's the deal: I'm not unique in any shape or form. This is all of you, right? Like, and so to ask you to give up 2 hours out of your week, I told you that, man, it had better be something special. And so we've been talking about that. We started last week. We're going to continue on. Like, if I'm going to ask for that type of commitment, like, dude, there better be a really good reason. And I told you guys that, like, you look around, we don't have a lot of stuff. Like, we don't have a lot of like extra ministries. You know, I mean, so I've been to churches where it's like I don't know, outreach ministry for clowns injured on the job, or like, and then like a women under 25 knitting group or something like that, right? Anybody like been to churches that's like the thing, right? Like professional coffee tasters, anonymous or something, and so like here's the deal. It's not that those are bad things. Like absolutely, those may absolutely be really, really, really good things. But I once had a pastor, a really wise dude, told me. He said, man, in ministry, you get the opportunity to sort of create your own monster. Problem is after you create that monster, you have to continue to feed and like take care of that monster. And so not just because we're a new church plant, but because honestly, man, I'm just not into creating a huge monster here at the Outpost. Like we don't have a lot of that stuff. Like if you notice, like we just like I said, those are really good things, and some of those things are like great, and maybe we could do with like an outreach ministry to clowns injured on the job. Maybe that's a thing here in Yom, right? And like someday we have to like do something like that, but the reality is probably not. So we keep it really stripped back, and so anything that we do, man, it's like either is completely necessary to reach our culture and the people with the good news of Jesus in our city. That's the first reason. Or the second one is that God's word like directly calls out for us to be engaged in this thing. And that's where we started last week. We started talking about this idea that the Sunday gathering for a lot of people has become like the greatest expression of their faith. Right? We sort of live in this individualistic and rugged individualism has come to sort of define our culture. And we've sort of found a way to mesh that ideology in with church. And church isn't a place you go, although that's how we talk about it now. Church is a people that you belong to. And so somehow we've been able to merge these two concepts that are like completely incapable of being merged, right? And so we're going to continue on this morning as we talk about Love 101. In fact, man, Ashton, thank you so very much for reading that. That was incredible. Man, I'm telling you, anybody have that read at their wedding? Anybody? Like, sure, okay. A couple people that like, dude, here's the deal. Absolutely just sublime, man. Paul brought his A game, had just the right amount of coffee the day that he wrote that, right? It's one of the greatest exposés on like what love is in the entire world, actually. I was going to say the entire Bible, but just it's incredible, right? And so people, whether you're a believer in Jesus or not, like it doesn't really matter. People still have that read at their wedding. But the problem is that word love is incredibly, incredibly unhelpful. Anybody agree with that? Like that's like let me explain what I mean. I love sushi. Like I love sushi, right? Like anybody else? Like this is. Dude, Trappers, you go to Trappers? Dude, the all-you-can-eat has been down since COVID, and it is killing me, right? Because I like to go belly up to the sushi bar and just, like, founder myself at the sushi bar. So I love sushi, right? I also love, like, me and Jack, we've been watching all the old Marvel movies. Anybody, that's your thing, right? Anybody else's bag? All right, I'm okay. Noelle back there representing. Thanks, girl. So we've been going through and watching all the old Marvel movies. Love Marvel movies, right? But here's the deal. I also love my wife. And we use the same English word to talk about all three of those things. And honestly, it sort of muddies the water a little bit, right? Because if I just mean like a strong affection for, right? Because that's what I mean when I say I love sushi. Is like, man, it tastes good. Like, just I enjoy it, and I have this really strong affinity, this strong affection for sushi. But if that's what I mean when I talk about my wife, well, man, we got a problem, right? Because that means that there's some days that I don't love my wife. If that's what love is, right? And there's some days that she probably doesn't love me, right? There's some moments where I've just gotten onto my kids and I've maybe had to come down kind of hard that I don't think a strong affection for dad is something that's running through their mind. You guys tracking on this, right? Incredibly unhelpful word to describe something that is actually a really, really big deal in the Bible. And so here's what I want to do. Just from the outset, I want us to go to the Bible and allow it to define a few aspects about love that are going to sort of set the stage for us. And here's what I got to tell you about this morning. I typically pride myself on trying to be able to bring some new information or some, like, you guys know me. I love the big reveal, the plot twist at the end. And it's like, we're looking this way and it's like, boom, got you over here. Right? Like, you guys, like, if you've been around the Outpost for a while, you know that's sort of how, like, I do things. I think it keeps us on our toes. I think there's good in that, right? But here's the deal about this morning. It's not going to be any new information, and I'm so sorry about that, right? Like, it's going to be some things that you've probably heard before. In fact, if you've ever been around church for any amount of time, like, this is probably not going to be something new, and yet that doesn't mean that it's not something profound, right? Because this love, this issue of how we love one another and how it propels us to live in community, right, it is a very basic, it is a very, very basic function that we have to agree on some things about, right? And so, like, I'm not looking to go extravagant and wild. Like, this is going to be pretty simple and pretty cut down this morning, right? But that doesn't mean that it isn't incredibly profound for who we are as a people here at the Outpost. You guys tracking about that? So here's the deal. Before I say love one more time, I'm going to let the Bible begin to define that. So Galatians chapter 2, verse 20. It says this about love. It says, I have been crucified with Christ, and it is no longer I who live, but Christ lives in me. In the life which I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God who what? Who loved me. He had a strong affection and a strong affinity for me, right? He's got my picture in his wallet. Like, he likes me. Is that what it says? No, actually, no. It's tied to what? It's tied to a verbal clause. He gave himself up for me. So just from the very beginning, like, allowing the Bible to define, like, maybe you've never read a single Bible verse in your entire life, right? Let's just pretend this is it, right? Is love just an emotion and a feeling based off of this right here? Well, I don't think we can make that case, right? Because here it's at least based in action, right? Ephesians 5, 1 and 2 says this. It says, therefore, be imitators of God as beloved children, and walk in love, right? So we're beloved children, favored children, walk in love, just as Christ also loved you, right? And here comes the verb after that. And gave himself up for us as an offering and a sacrifice to God. It's a fragrant aroma. And love is not a feeling. It's not what something does to you, although it does involve our feelings. Primarily, love refers to action. Yeah, I told you guys, right? Like, we're not going into profoundly deep waters here this morning, right? Like, it's like I venture a guess, if I passed out a piece of paper to every person in here and asked you to define love, it would probably have something to do with the outworking of that love, right? There may be something about feelings or emotions or how love generates, something inside of you. But at the end of the day, probably everyone in here sort of gathers the fact that love is tied to action. But I think that we can actually miss how profound that small little truth actually is, right? You see, true love is a comprehensive lifestyle of actionable service given to others and with others as its focal point. Right? Love based on feelings is hopelessly unreliable because feelings change, right? You're talking about my kids. It's like, yeah, maybe they love me one second when we're headed to, like, Dairy Queen after baseball practice to get ice cream or something, right? But then the next minute when I've just come down on them for the 15th time for leaving their wet towels in their floor, right, after they shower, it's like maybe that affinity, that strong affection for me, it isn't there anymore, right? So here's the deal. Here's what I want to do, because I want to drive this incredibly simple thing home. We're going to do something. You guys know me. Like, I don't do this very often because I think it's super weird when, like, I ask everybody to talk. But I'm going to do that this morning, right? I'm going to break one of my rules, and I'm going to do something. So I'm going to say love, and you're going to say action, right? We're going to practice a couple times. So I'm going to say it. 1, 2, 3, love. All right, just the ladies, love. Just the men, all right? Love. Okay. Now, this time, here's the deal, because every time I say the word love this morning, I want to do something. You can't all yell it out, or we'll never get anywhere, right? So you're gonna say that word every time I say the word love, right? There you go. You're getting the picture, right? Every time I say the word love, yep, there you go. A few of you more are getting it. You're gonna say that word in your head. So let's practice in your head. You ready? Love. I didn't hear you, dude. You got love. Okay, I think that's about everybody. One more time. Love, action. Right. So It's going on inside of your head. Again, I think that's totally weird, so I don't do that very often. But here's the deal. I want to begin to ingrain this idea that, man, that love isn't just something that we have. Love is a thing that we do. And again, that is a simple yet incredibly profound shift. And it affects us in some huge, huge ways. True love is a settled commitment to act for the good of others regardless of circumstances. Settled commitment. Even when you don't feel like it, and even when you feel like the other person doesn't actually deserve your love, you still do it anyways because it's a settled commitment in your mind. So here's the question, and this is going to kind of set us up to where we're headed this morning. Is that the type of love that defines our society? Anybody want to take a stab at that? Pretty simple answer. I don't think so, right? I don't think so. I don't think that's what we see as we look around Yum or as we look around America or we peruse social media. I don't think that's the type of love that we see. I think people claim to love or claim whatever, but like I don't see that being lived out. Anybody else like seeing something that I'm not? I'm totally open to this, right? Anybody seeing? I don't think so. Here's the deal, though. What about in churches? And I'm not like here to beat up on other churches, and so I'll just ask the really hard question, right? What about here at the Outpost? Right? Does that definition of love describe what you've experienced since you've been here? Well, so here's the deal. I would love to be really naive and say, like, yeah, of course it is, right? Everybody's like, but like, is that really what we're like defined by? Is this sort of like others-focused, outward, like oriented, like action-oriented love? Is that what defines us? Or as people talk about their experience at the Outpost, do they maybe talk about other things? Let me like tell you what I sort of pick up on, right? This is just talking with people who go here and people who don't, but have heard about the Outpost. Here's what I hear. Typically, something about the building. They like where it's at. It's, central, it's in town, or it's like, maybe the architecture of the building in here, or it's like maybe our music, right? Ethan, love you, buddy. You're not Passion, you're not Chris Tomlin, or, but it's like, dude, it's great. It's like, Ben, appreciate you, buddy, It's like, it's good. It's like, it's heartfelt, genuine worship. And man, as I hear people talk about that, that's stuff, really good things, right? And that kind of came out bad, man. Sorry, buddy. But I mean that in all goodness, right? Like, so anyways, or maybe like I'll dig on myself, right? Maybe it's a pastor. Maybe it's like, well, younger guy, he's, speaking ain't half bad or something like that. I hear, those are the things that I hear people define our church by. And yet, I think the Bible makes it clear that we're supposed to be a people defined by love. I just asked Danielle last night, and we talked through this, because I was having a hard time coming up with what it would sound like if someone defined their experience at the Outpost by this type of love. What would that sound like? What if it wasn't about music or speaking or how comfortable the seats are or aren't, whatever? Like what if it wasn't about any of those things? But what if people just had to like identify and define the Outpost by how we loved? What would that even sound like? Or how you've been challenged to show that kind of love? So, if that's not how we're defined, I think that means that we've got room to grow. So the question is, how do we fix it? If that's not what we're defined by, because here's the deal, just like peek behind the curtain, right? Like the early church, they were defined by this, y'all. Like they were, like they didn't have good marketing or evangelism strategies. The early church was just flat out irresistible. Like they had a love that was so pervasive, so others focused. Like dude, it would have crippled the Roman world. They tried to replicate how the Christians were caring for the poor and like the sick within their city, and they began to like experiment with these ideas of like social, like government, like social ran, like outreach centers, like paying the pagan priests and stuff, and they quickly figured out that it would have bankrupted the Roman Empire to try to replicate what the Christians were doing naturally. Y'all, that's what allowed the church to explode across the known world, right? In a matter of just a few generations. It was irresistible love. And so here's the question, and this is just laying everything in front of you. Here's the question that I want us to answer this morning, right? How do we come to be a people defined by our action-oriented and outward-focused love? And don't forget, we're in a series, right? How do our expedition groups, those things that we're setting up, like, because not this next Sunday night, but the Sunday night after that, this is September 19th, that's going to be the first meeting for a lot of us, man. That's going to be the first time that we get together, right? Is how do our expeditions groups lead us closer to being that type of people? Because at the end of the day, man, that's what matters. Being defined by that type of love. And it's actually central to who we are as people. But before we do that, I want to identify what's wrong and how we've kind of went off the rails in this. But I think to do that, we got to talk about black holes for just a second. So I'm kind of a little bit of a science nerd, and black holes are fascinating to anybody who, like, partially because we don't know much about them, right? But let me just do a down and dirty sort of explanation on this as quick as I can, right? Anything with mass, so I have mass, right? Size and volume, weight, all that good stuff, right? Anything with mass has a certain amount of gravitational pull. Now, here's the deal. I'm like infinitesimally small when compared to the universe around me, right? And so the gravitational pull that a human being has is like, dude, it's basically like it's incredibly small, right? Unless you're in love, and then you can feel the other person's gravitational pull. But so here's the deal. A black hole has mass. Its name is a little bit of a misnomer, right? Like it's not, as anybody else picture it this way, is like literally just like a drain in space, and where it let out to, like nobody knows, right? That's kind of how I've always thought about black holes, but their name is actually a little bit of a misnomer because they actually have mass. In fact, like even some of the smaller black holes have a mass that is like 4 billion times greater than that of our sun. That's enormous. It's enormous, right? But here's the deal. All that mass is collapsed in on itself to something they call the singularity. Have you heard of that before? But it's called the singularity because, like, just imagine, if you will, like gravity for just a second, right? I'm putting out like the strength of the gravity that I exert, or just even the earth, right, exerts is like water moving through a garden hose, right? A little bit of pressure, not a whole lot, you know? But if you imagine a black hole, Imagine all of the water of Niagara Falls like draining through a hole the size of a quarter in like all at once, right? It's like unimaginably strong amounts of like pressure that are being exerted by this thing. In fact, there's this sort of zone, they call it the event horizon. It's like the point of no return, right? Like if something crosses this line, this like event horizon, like there's absolutely no escape. And it's called the singularity, like maybe about the size of a basketball, some people think, right? It's called the singularity because anything that crosses that event horizon line is literally unmade at the atomic level, right? Like it just completely unmakes and destroys not even light. In fact, time even gets like kind of jacked up as it crosses that event horizon. It's terrifying, right? I mean, nobody's ever died from a black hole, right? But if like one ever came knocking, we wouldn't stand a chance, right? It's like not even light can escape that, right? And it doesn't matter, like, you can't pour enough matter into a black hole to satiate it, to like stop its thing. In fact, everything that goes into a black hole, it just makes it stronger, actually. We have theories that maybe they break down over time, but actually some of the scarier theories is that they actually just keep feeding. And the more they feed, the bigger they get, and the more powerful they get. And a lot of people think that's how the world is going to end, is just a couple of them big ones are just going to collide together and just suck us in, right? That's going to be sort of the end of things, right? So here's the deal. What does that have to do with us? When we live without love, and the elevation of self becomes our main motivator, we become a black hole. Here's how this works. We all have needs, right? need for success is a good one. That's pretty relatable, right? I don't know of any idealistic 19-year-olds looking to go off to college so they can be homeless one day, right? Like, oh, this statistic class is really going to set me up to live in my grandma's basement one of these days. You know, I don't think anybody is like tracking that. I don't think there's ever been a farmer who has like planted seeds and then looked back like, yeah, man, I can't wait for 6 months from now when it's still a barren field. Like nobody. That's unnatural. In fact, if you have like a complete lack of like need for success, then we would say there's actually something really, really probably wrong with you, right? This is a legitimate need, that what we put our hand to, what we grow and we tend to, like, man, it needs to produce fruit. But man, if need for success is our ultimate motivator, then we become black holes. And we will do literally anything to ensure success. People become a means to an end. We will lie, cheat, steal, like murder, like to ensure success, like whatever that looks like and however you would define that. But when success becomes the ultimate motivator, when that's the thing that drives us, man, it drives us into a black hole. And use another one, validation, man. This is tough. Like, dude, we wake up first thing in the morning and what do? We open our social media feeds. And we begin taking these little 2-second hits of dopamine as we scroll through an endless feed of self-validation, man. Like, here's the deal. Man, I beat up on social media a couple weeks ago. So I just want you to know, like, I'm not like the anti-social media dude or anything, but it's just kind of low-hanging fruit, right? But dude, what do? We curate this like careful list of people that validate our thoughts, our opinions, the way that we see the world, and we can like it, and we can give it a heart if we want to, right? And the voices that we don't agree with, we can block them for 30 days, we can unfriend them, whatever the case, right? Like we don't, dude, it's created this perfect platform that feeds the self-validation black hole. And has that caused any problems in anybody's relationships? Serious show of hands. Is that caused problems in anybody's relationships? Yeah, okay. Got a couple honest people in here. So, yeah, man, it's caused problems in mine and with me. And so we go on and we do self-validating research, or we listen to self-validating news sources, right? And in this like sort of like bringing in and feeding the self-validation like black hole that can easily exist in us, dude, we leave a trail of destruction. It's not just success, it's not self-validation, it's pleasure. Anybody seen people go off the rails on that? And they consume, and the trail of destruction that can lead. It's ego, it's finances, it's whatever, man. We have 1,000 legitimate needs, and when any one of those becomes our main motivator, man, we can quickly become a black hole that leaves destruction. See, love is not a black hole. Love is more like a cell. A cell's main purpose is exactly the opposite of a black hole. A cell's main purpose, its marching orders, right, is to give itself away to reproduce itself. A cell doesn't die when it does this, right? It doesn't like create a new cell and then die, right? In fact, when a cell reproduces itself and it becomes another cell, right, it's more of a cell than it ever has been. In fact, it's accomplishing its function. And now there are two cells that can continue on to produce and reproduce themselves. And the end result of that, it isn't the destruction of everything that gets close to it. The end result of that process is actually that it generates life. You see, the paradox of love is that the more of it that I give, right, you're supposed to be saying action, right? The more of it that I have outward-focused, others-oriented, like action-based love, the more of that I give away, the more of myself that I give away, the more truly like alive and truly human I actually am. So here's the deal. This idea of self-giving love is central to what it means to be human. And on one occasion, Jesus has asked this question that is going to tie directly into this concept. But we kind of got to take a left turn for just a second. This guy, he's a lawyer. He stands up and he asks Jesus this question. He said, essentially, what does God want from me? Right? Anybody else ever struggled with that question? I'm a pastor, and I struggle with it just about weekly, right? What does God actually want from me? There's all these things in his law. There's these things. And maybe if you come in and out of here every week, it's like maybe one week we're talking about like depression or anxiety. Maybe one week we're talking about like finances or marriage, or maybe one week we're talking about faith, or like don't be judgmental, or whatever the case is. Like maybe we're talking about all these things, and so it can kind of get a little confusing at times. And I just want to reduce it down. What does God require of me? This guy, he's a lawyer, and he knew the Jewish law. Man, they had 613 different laws that God had given their people. And he said, bro, that's a lot. I just want you to just reduce it down. Like, what does God desire from me? Here's how the question came out, though. It sounds a little different. We've got to do a little work around it. Matthew chapter 22, verses 35 and 36. He says, one of them, a lawyer, right, asked him a good question, testing him, teacher, which is the greatest commandment? Which is the great commandment in the law? And here's the idea. The idea is that in God's kingdom, we experience the fullest life as we follow God's commands. Remember, God's kingdom isn't defined by like borders or something like that. God's kingdom is where the rule and reign of the king extend. And so, this guy is essentially asking, like, what's the most important rule of the king so that he can have life in the kingdom? Valid question, right? In fact, here the book of Luke records this same exact exchange in Luke chapter 10, but Luke changes a few of the details. Actually, Luke does a little bit of that thinking for us. Luke chapter 10, verse 25 says, the lawyer stood up and put him to the test, saying, teacher, not what is the greatest commandment in the law. Remember, Luke has done a little bit of the thinking for us. He says, teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? Same exchange, same answer, right? Like same teaching. This is something that scholars refer to as the Synoptic Problem, right? These are similar stories, but they have some little details that seem out of sync and make it seem like the Bible isn't like quite jiving with itself, right? But actually, I just showed you at its heart, both of these are the same question, right? Here's what Jesus says. He said to him, what is written in the law? This is in Luke chapter 10, verse 26. So he says, he just points him back to the thing that he says in Matthew's account of the gospel. It's like, what is written in the law and how does it read to you? Right? Now, here's the deal. Both accounts give the same exact answer. One account, Matthew's account, has Jesus giving us the answer, and Luke's account has the lawyer giving the answer. So, same exact words. We're just going to read, I think we're going to read Luke's account, right? And here's what the lawyer said. He answered him. This is the great command. This is how it reads to him. He says, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. Jesus kind of splits those up when he says it, right? You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, with all your mind. And the second is like it, right? You shall love your neighbor as yourself. Anybody heard that? Anybody heard that? Like, for real, show of hands. Who in here has heard it? Just about everybody that, if you've been around church for any amount of time, you've probably heard that talked about, right? It's the great commandment. Love God and love people. She says that's it. So we'll dismiss now, and I'll turn you guys loose. Right? Everybody good with that? Like, can you just like take that and run with it? Right? Everybody good? Can we live that out? Good. Thumbs up. Thumbs down. Thumbs down. Actually, I think. And here's why. Let me explain. See, there are actually people in that audience the day that Jesus said that. I mean, they were literally sitting at Jesus' feet as he made that statement. He gave the teaching, and right after this, Jesus gives the teaching of the Good Samaritan, right? These people were there, they listened to Jesus say these words, and then just a few short years later, I mean, these are people who watched the resurrection, some of which, like, they were there for the resurrection. They seen the resurrected Jesus. They heard this teaching, and then they went on to go lead churches, right? And here's the deal. After the book of Acts, pretty much every book that comes after that is a testimony to the church's inability to actually live this out. It's churches who failed. They failed to love God and love people the way that Jesus has commanded them. And so people like Paul or Peter or John, they write these letters to like correct these churches. And like, you guys are off the rails. Like, you've totally abandoned. And like, the people leading those churches were sitting at Jesus' feet when he said this, man. I don't care what seminary you've been to. There ain't nothing better than that. And they still failed to live this out. That beautiful passage that Ashton read for us, like, do you know why we got that passage? It's because the Corinthian church was wilding out, man. They were off the rails, suing the pants off each other. They had a guy sleeping with his mother-in-law. They were getting drunk at communion. They had like favorite teachers. They had given their allegiance to certain teachers over like Jesus. Dude, their worship services were out of hand. Like they were like, they couldn't even get anything done because people were yelling and screaming and like doing stuff in the middle of their worship service. Dude, they were off the rails. So what does Paul do? He gives us like the manifesto on what real love looks like. Let me correct you. You want to love your neighbor. You want to love God and love your neighbor as yourself. Like, here's what it looks like. Here's what real love is. It ain't sleeping with your mother-in-law. It isn't taking each other to court and like suing each other. It isn't fighting, getting drunk at community. It isn't any of these. Like, real love. This is what real love is. And so, over and over again, starting in Romans, Corinthians, man, they get 2 letters. They're so wild, man. They get 2 of them. In fact, a few churches did, right? And sometimes it's good, and sometimes it's correcting. And there's a few churches that like they haven't went off the rails in this, but Paul is just giving them some training and some like encouragement, like, hey, do these things, stay away from these things, or else you're going to end up like these people, right? Like if you want to not fall off the rails on loving God and loving your neighbor, then here are the things that you need to do. We actually have a name for those commands about how Paul and these other church leaders command us to love one another well. And we're super creative, and they're just called the one another's. Anybody heard of those before? Right, there's the one another statements in the Bible. So if you don't know, let me sort of introduce this to you. There are over 100 sayings, 100 like sentences that give us a one another statement. I'll give you some examples here in a minute. And the idea is it's a practical outworking of how we love our neighbors. How do we love God, and how do we love our neighbor as ourselves? We get 100 one another statements about how to do this. About half of those are geared towards churches and how we live out those one another's together in community. And roughly half of the other ones are how we live outside of these 4 walls and outside of the church, and how we love people who aren't followers of Jesus, right? And so let me give you a few like stats about these. A third of these one another statements are about how we should love one another. Just explicitly, here's how you love one another. Here's a few examples, right? Galatians chapter 5, verse 13. It says, "For you were called to freedom, brethren. Only do not turn your freedom into an opportunity for the flesh, but through love," which you said action, right? Serve one another. This is how you love one another. Don't take your freedoms and your liberties. Don't misapply those, right? Like as some opportunity for self-gain. Like don't turn inwards. Don't become a black hole, right? Like no, serve others. Keep your focus outside. Ephesians 4:2, it says this, with all humility and gentleness, with patience, showing tolerance, right? Show tolerance for one another in love. Anybody just need patience extended to them sometimes, right? Man, we just need like, our world is not a gentle world. And yet, God's community, His people, are supposed to be defined by humility, gentleness, patience, and tolerance for one another. This is how we love one another, right? 1/3 of the one another's is about how our love should produce unity. Galatians 5:26, it says this, "Let us not become boastful," right? Challenging one another, right? Envying one another. Don't do that. Stay away from those things, right? 1 Thessalonians 5:15. "See that no one repays another for evil," right? Evil for evil, "but always seek after that which is good for one another and for all people." Seeking good for one another. Anybody like, is that difficult at all? Seek the good for other people. About 15% of the one another's are about our humility and the deference that we pay to other people. Here's an example, Philippians 2:3, right? Do nothing of selfish or empty conceit, but with humility of mind, regard one another as more important than yourself. Everybody kind of get how these one another passages work, right? And the remaining one another's cover basically any issue that isn't immediately solved by love, unity, and humility. Here's a few examples. Galatians 6:2, bear one another's burdens, and thereby fulfill the law of Christ. 1 Peter 4:9, love this one, man. Be hospitable to one another without complaint. Hebrews 10:24, and let us consider how to stimulate one another to love and good deeds. And so here's the deal. I've given you 8. That was 8 if you were keeping track. There was 8 one another statements in the Bible. That means there are 92 more out there. 92 more ways, practical ways that the New Testament authors have given us to be able to live out the great commandment well. I want to draw maybe kind of a conclusion about those one another's. And don't miss this, because this is incredibly profound, and I'm not actually joking. It's not going to sound like it is, but trust me, right? Just hang with me. Right, here it is. The fact that these are called one another statements means that it is all of our responsibility to put them into practice. Profound, right? I know we're treading deep theological waters here, but hang with me for just a second. I'm actually not kidding about that, because here's how things typically work in a church setting. We have a pretty good number of people here this morning. We've been 100 or a little over 100, and maybe for a new church plant, that's pretty awesome, right? And in this group of people that gathers, some of which I know some of you really well, some of you are visitors, some of you I just haven't got a chance to know very well yet. What I do know is that there are some really serious needs, all sorts of needs in this community. And there are immediate financial, housing, job-related needs, just physical, people need those things. Right here, right now, this morning, people here. I know people that need that. There are people that are struggling in their marriages, struggling with their children. And they need our encouragement. They need us walking alongside them. They need wise counsel. And guess what, man? Those needs, they're here this morning. There are people that are experiencing or are about to experience loss. There's nothing we can do to fix that. They just need us to mourn with them. On the other hand, man, there are people that have been blessed beyond measure. They need us to rejoice with them. There's several in just here that are expecting new life. They need us to celebrate with them, to support them in this upcoming season, right? There are people facing difficult decisions and they need support, they need prayer, yes, but man, they need us walking with them through that. Somebody just needs somebody to just walk with them in the middle of this, right? I don't need you to try to fix it. I don't need you to answer the questions for me. I just need to know that I'm not alone in this. That stuff exists in this room and in people that aren't in this room here in our church. But what typically happens is the really serious stuff, it'll kind of bubble to the surface and it'll make its way to my desk. If I should caveat that, if people are comfortable talking about that. But there are people who walk in and out of this room every single week silently, right? With unmet needs, praying that God would intervene in their story. And here's the deal. If it's just up to the pastoral staff, stuff gets missed. I can't know you guys. I can't know all of you guys. Man, we're getting to the size now where it's beyond me, it's beyond Adam, it's beyond anyone who is in leadership here at this church to be able to carry that. And yet we sort of set this up as the fullest expression of our faith, and the problem is needs get missed. Now, if I spent 40 hours a week just spending time with people, it wouldn't even begin to scratch the surface to the depth necessary to see some of these actual needs. Like, that doesn't even include my ability to step in and love and like serve those needs in any way. That's another 40-hour week, right? And dude, what happens is people become disillusioned with their faith because it seems like God isn't listening, or perhaps maybe he doesn't even care. People that desperately need the love of God, like lived out in tangible ways, like are left in want and feeling like overlooked. So please don't miss this. God is absolutely capable of meeting needs and displaying his love for people without us, but God's grand plan is that people would experience his love in the reality of his presence through the outward-focused, others-oriented, sacrificial love of his followers. Yeah, like people like, somebody comes, and Jesus even talks about this. He gives this example, and it's kind of tongue-in-cheek in one sense. It's like, I need a loaf of bread or something like that. And it's just like, sorry, I can't help you. No, I'll pray for you, though, that Jesus, that God will, give you a loaf of bread. And it's like, God's like, no, dummy. Like, I want you. Like you're the tool, you're the instrument, you're the thing that I want to extend my love to people through. You're a conduit, you're an image bearer of the creator of the universe, meant to display the beauty and the reality of his presence, his love, his meeting of needs here in the world. It's like, is God capable of just miraculously like doing stuff? Yeah. Absolutely, he doesn't need us, but the beauty of it, and for some strange reason, he has chosen to partner with mankind to be the ones to like distribute that love into the world. And so what would our community look like, man, if we were all just trying to outdo one another in love and genuine humility? Would there be any unmet needs? Would there be anyone like feeling lonely or overwhelmed? Maybe just at the prospect of facing difficult situations. Would that exist? And so here's the deal. This begins to answer part of that question I set out. Like, how does expedition groups lead us towards this? Because while I can't get to know all of you in this setting, right? Like it's impossible on a Sunday gathering. What happens when we begin to meet in a group of like 8 to 12 people? What happens there? You guys sit around the dinner table and you meet around the dinner table for a couple hours every week, sharing stories about work, marriage, finances, struggles, joys, things that we just need to mourn with you over. Like, it's like all of a sudden now you have this sense of community that people can actually know you, can actually know your needs. And guess what? In that group of 8 to 12, it's very possible. Like, we are very capable of stepping in and extending the type of love that is needed in those situations. Like, we can become defined by that. But here's the deal. I still just can't cut you all loose and say, let's go live this out. Because just knowing the one another's, like, here's the deal. It isn't enough. Like, let's go back to one, right? Let me go back in my notes here. 1 Peter 4:9. Be hospitable to one another without complaint. Here's the deal. I'm about to have some of you guys over to my house every Sunday night at 5:30. And Sundays, I'm not even gonna lie to you, man. Please don't not sign up for my group because of this, right? I definitely love you and want you at our house, right? But let me just this may be a dangerous example. Let me just give you this example. Like Sundays after this, I'm toast. I want to go home and like take a nap. Typically, by Sunday afternoon, we got Weekend House. Anybody else know what Weekend House is? Yeah? Been laying around, eating Cheez-Its and sitting on the couch and stuff. And we got Sunday House, and like what happens is typically about 6, 7 o'clock, we make a mad dash and we clean it all up when we get ready for school the next day, and then we crash and we start the week, right? Totally healthy, But here's the deal. When we have 12 adults, with the amount of kids that we have in this church, probably upwards of 25 people about to invade our house at 5:30 on Sunday nights. I got to be hospitable. And did you miss that part where it says, without complaint? I haven't figured that out yet. I'm sorry. I love you guys, but I haven't figured out how to do that And to be genuinely hospitable without any complaint in my heart about doing that. Because the reality is that sometimes I really do look forward to it. And I know it's possible. I know it's possible to be hospitable without complaint. But there are these moments that it seems beyond my ability to control. I can't live this out. It doesn't matter how hard I just white knuckle it and try. I can't do that. That's an easy one. Be hospitable. Dude, put something on. Put a smile on your face. Just don't do it don't complain about it, right? That should be easy. Not to mention some of the be humble. Y'all, come on, man. Be humble. Put the needs of others before your needs. Be tolerant of one another. Be gentle. How many of you just have a naturally gentle spirit? Some of you do. And some of you, I don't want you to lie in church, so I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand, right? You're just not. And yet, to be to love one another well, we have to have this. So, where does this type of love come from? I'm so glad you asked. It's 10:30 service. I'm so glad that you asked this question because I love answering questions that you ask, right? My man John, the Apostle John, gives us the answer to where that love comes from. This supernatural, otherworldly, genuine love for one another. John, and I'm just going to let John do it because he's going to do a way better job than me. Here it is. This is 1 John chapter 4. We're going to pick up in verse 7 if you have your Bibles and follow on. He says, "Dear friends, let us continue to love one another." And just right out of the gate, John answers it. For love comes from God, right? Anyone who loves is a child of God and knows God. But anyone who does not love does not know God, for God is love. God showed how much He loved us, right? Not through sending us a card or sending us a letter that was Him proclaiming His affection for us. No. His love is deeper, it's real, it's outward focused, it's action oriented, it's self-giving, right? That He loved us so much that He sent His one and only Son into the world so that we may have life eternal through Him. John says this is real love. Not that we loved God, but that He loved us and sent His Son as a sacrifice to take away our sins. Dear friends, since God loved us that much, now we surely ought to love each other. No one has ever seen God. We get this. That's easy. But, get this, if we love each other, not only does God live in us, right? But His love is brought to full expression in us. We are meant to be the clearest picture of how God loves other people. We're meant to be the clearest picture of the gospel as we live out this type of love, the love that God has put in us through Jesus. Furthermore, we have seen with our own eyes and now testify that the Father sent His Son to be the Savior of the world. John's just sort of like claiming his authority to say this. And bro, I was there, I watched it happen, and there's people still alive, so you can check them on this, right? This is real, this happened. And all who declare that Jesus is the Son of God, don't miss this, man. All who declare that Jesus is the Son of God have God living in them, and they live in God. We know how much God loves us, and we have put our trust in His love. God is love, and all who live in love live in God, and God lives in them. And as we live in God, get this, our love grows more perfect. If you're reading along your Bible, circle, highlight, underline that word grows, because here's the deal. My ability to be hospitable to one another without complaint, it's grown a little bit over time. As I've come to realize as I come to realize how Jesus was hospitable to me, through the God, the implications of that on my own hospitality. But I begin to grow in that type of love. So we will not be afraid on the day of judgment, but we can face Him with confidence because we live like Jesus here in this world. Such love has no fear, because perfect love expels all fear. If we are afraid, it is for fear of punishment. And this shows that we have not fully experienced His perfect love. And here's the crux. This is the pinnacle of John's argument. Here's what he says. We love each other because He loved us first. Someone says, I love God, but hates a fellow believer. That person is a liar. For if we do not love people we can see, how can we love God whom we cannot see? And He has given us this command. Those who love God must also love their fellow believers. And that's straight out of Jesus' mouth. Straight out of that lawyer's mouth, right? So let me just simplify this way down here, and we're going to get ready and close things out. Only a heart that has been transformed by God's own outward-focused, action-based love that has been displayed through the cross of Jesus in the gospel, only that heart has the ability to truly love others in the same way. This is God's plan. His plan is to use people who have been transformed by the love of Jesus through the gospel, right? He wants to use those people to display that same love to others as the hands and feet of Jesus. We give the gospel flesh and blood through our outward-focused, action-oriented love. And so here's the deal. Jesus made this statement, that the great commandment, and He meshes two things together. Love God, love people, love your neighbor. Deuteronomy 6:4, this is called the Shema. Jews would pray that. Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul, and with all your strength. Right? They would pray that. They would stop. And it was the centering back to God every single day, 3 times a day. They would stop. They would face the temple wherever they were at. And then they would center themselves back under this realization that they served the one true God of Israel. And to serve them meant that they did it with their heart, their soul, their mind, and their strength. They didn't leave anything out. This is action-oriented. This takes all of me to do. And then the second thing actually comes from this really obscure verse over in Leviticus chapter 19, verse 18, right? And it's all about don't repay evil for evil, right? But love your neighbor as yourself. And yet, Jesus and even this lawyer string these two concepts together. If you go back and you look at the 10 Commandments, what are the first 4? Right? It's no other gods before me. It's don't make any graven images. It's don't profane. Losing my place here. It's don't take the name of the Lord in vain. That was the word I was looking for. And remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. First 4. It's how we relate to God. What are the next 6 about? Well, don't. The very next one, number 5, is honor your father and mother. That's the very next one. And then it just keeps on going. It's how we relate to people. Jesus in the Beatitudes. First half of the Beatitudes, what are they about? Our attitude and our actions towards God. Last half of the Beatitudes, it's our attitudes and our actions towards our fellow man. 613 laws. I've said that a couple times this morning. About a third of those are how we relate to God. A third of those are how we relate to our fellow man. And then the last little bit is sort of a mixed bag, right? Man, can I just be I've got time. Can I just be dead honest with you guys for just a second? There's this moment every week in sermon prep that I've collected all this information, and I try to put it together in a way that's most engaging, that keeps people's attention, that it really leads to something good, right? And so I've got all this information, but there's this moment every week that it has to make its way inward. It has to become personal. It has to become more than just information I know. It has to be a truth that fills my own heart. Typically, it happens fairly early on in the week, right? It does. I'm just to be honest with you, I really struggled with this sermon this week for that reason. It was last night at finally about 1:30 in the morning, it made its way inward on me, and it was over bent knees and praying through this thing, man. Real transformational sermons. They come from a heart that's overflowing with the reality of that truth that's been pressed in me, right? Because I need it every single week, just like you do. It's where my illustrations come from. It's where all my jacked up stories come. It's me, man. I need this stuff. And that has to be a truth that has overflowed my heart, if it's ever going to flow out to you in any sort of effective way. And so it is with our love. You have to get this, right? The bottom line is that the love of God towards us and our love for Him, it is the love of God towards us and our love for Him that overflows into our relationships, allowing us to truly love others. Man, if we can't extend humility, if we can't be humble, then we've missed a really major factor of the gospel. Namely, that the creator and king of the universe humbled himself. He came and walked on our streets and allowed his creation to kill him, right? Dude, get any more humble than that. And it was that humility that has saved us and transforming us. I mean, when the reality of that seeks in, when the reality of that just overflows you, man, dude, who are we to not be humble or to be gentle or hospitable? To meet needs, to stir one another up, to love and good deeds, to right, bear one another's burden. Who are we to not do that when? And so, here's the deal. I think this leads us to a couple places. Maybe you've never experienced that love before in your life. I mean, you can do that before you leave this morning, man. You can cry out to God, Father, save me. I'm sorry for all the ways that I've tried to run my own life. Forgive me for that. Jesus, I follow after you with everything that I have. It's that simple. You can do that right where you're sitting before you. And here's the deal. If you do, and you need to do that, man, please let somebody know. Man, we're not going to make it weird. We're not going to make a deal out of it. I just want to rejoice with you. I want to help you take those next steps, whatever that may be for you. So I think maybe for some of us we need that. Maybe you've been following Jesus for a long time and you need to go back. And you know there's a lack of love in your life for other people. You're failing in this area, right? As we all do every single day. You've become a black hole. Maybe you need to go back to the gospel. Let its truth and its goodness wash over you again. So I'm going to invite you to do that as we close out. But I'm also going to invite you to do one more thing. I'm going to invite you to take a real, tangible step to engage in the type of community where we can begin to live this out. Not next Sunday, but the Sunday after, we're starting our expedition groups. I got room in my group, man. I know we got several groups that still have plenty of room. All of our groups, in fact, still have plenty of room in them. And so what I've asked all of our leaders and hosts, you guys look back there, see the map on the wall. All of their houses are marked on that map somewhere. And they're going to be back there with a roster. And they're going to be recruiting people as you walk out the door. I encourage you, man, stop and talk with one of those people. If none of the dates and times work for you or work for your schedule, man, let me know. Look, we will work something. It is that important. But a good, tangible first step for you today, maybe begin to take a step towards engaging in the type of community where we can actually extend and be called into this type of love. Everybody good? All right, so here's the deal. You guys are going to have a few people standing at the back at the map, so if you typically like to congregate back there and talk and drink coffee, maybe don't do that today, right? Because we're going to have people back there. But if you haven't been, this is everybody in this room, man, you are invited. If someone hasn't approached you or you haven't been talked to you, don't leave today without engaging in one of these groups as we begin to live into this kind of love. We doing all right? We good? Thumbs up? It's getting warm in here. I shouldn't wear a long sleeve shirt. That's on me. I'm going to pray. Close this out. Sound good? Father God, we love you and we praise you. We thank you for your love that you displayed through coming to live the life that we could never live and to die the death that we deserved. I just pray that example of love would wash over our hearts this week. Propel us outwards to love others the way that you have loved us. God, you're good, and I pray that if there's anyone here that doesn't know you, Father, that they wouldn't leave today without changing that. We love you and we praise you. We thank you for all this. In Jesus' name, amen. Awesome. Guys, have a great week.